If you're often left with odds and ends and bits and pieces and individual stems of flowers and you're not sure how to arrange them and how to make something gorgeous, then today's video is just for you. So welcome back. Now today's video is going to show you how you can use those odd numbers of flowers that you sometimes might be left with, or you might have picked up a mixed bunch from a supermarket and there's not matching flowers in there and you're not really sure how to incorporate them into a floral design. Then this video might be helpful for you in understanding how you can make an informal design where you're not matching flowers on either side. If you're a traditional arranger, then often you're used to matching your flowers and colours on either side of a centre line. But to make it a bit easier for you today, I'm going to do an arrangement in this amazing blue container. I'm not sure yet whether I've used it on the channel, but it goes so nicely with these blue larkspur. They're all odd months of flowers that I haven't been able to use this week in floral design, and I thought the colour link was absolutely perfect. Now some of these flowers are past their best and they are flowers that I wouldn't use as a commercial florist, but other flowers are perfectly acceptable to use. And I've read a post this week online where a florist mentioned quite often she gets odd months of flowers left over in work at the beginning of the week. So this could be florists in work, or this could be flower arrangers who are buying mixed bunches from the supermarket. I read a post where she was finding it difficult to arrange when she only had one flower or maybe two that were a little bit of an unusual or wibbly wobbly shape. And I think a posy style arrangement is probably really perfect for this. And I'm also going to use wire netting, commonly referred to as chicken wire. And I'm going to make a very loose arrangement that doesn't really have any structure or any formality. So for those of you that like the more whimsical and unstructured design, this one might be for you. So the wire netting has been folded into three and then it's been forced inside the container. I've made sure that the gaps in the wire netting aren't too wide because a lot of the stems I've got here are quite thin. And my first tip, if you're starting out using wire netting and you're finding that your flowers are really rotating and moving and spinning around, is to make sure that the gauge is small enough. If it's big holes and you're inserting a small stem, then it is going to rotate and move around and you're going to get really frustrated. So I'm aiming for a circular design today. Let's put some water in first, that will be a good start. I'm aiming for an all-round design today, but I'm not looking for that perfect posy that you might do when you're arranging in floral foam. When you're arranging in floral foam, it's easy to get a circular shape. Foam will hold your flowers into place. But I'm going to go a little bit more free-flowing and a bit more gentle. And if you're in the UK, you will probably recognise this is privet. This is quite often a garden foliage that we often use as hedging between properties. We use it more, I suppose, for its practical use than its aesthetic appearance. It's not a particularly attractive foliage, but this time of the year it has that lovely white flower on it, and that's going to be really good to help create a link between my container and my arrangement on the top. Now this one has a short stem, but it has three branches that are protruding off in different directions. But I have the ability of inserting it down into the wire netting and then splaying out the materials so it doesn't look quite so tight and compact. It just takes a little bit of time to maneuver them through the wire netting so that they stay in place, but I didn't want that big clump in the middle. Sometimes the privet is long enough to place in as it is. Other times you need to cut it shorter. But remember that it's not like floral foam. You don't have the advantage of having extra height. The stems have to go right down into the container so that they're reaching the water. And what I'm really trying to do is a very loose, round shape. My plan was to make this all round, but it might become front facing as we go along. So it's something that might adapt as I'm going along. And I've only used maybe 4 or 5 pieces of the privet, but that's given me a nice circular outline. It's also given me a little bit of height in the middle. I also have some Ming fern or asparagus fern that I don't think I've ever used on the channel because this is something I don't buy very often. It was very popular in the 2000s. We don't see a great deal of it now. That one is long enough to get right the way down to the bottom, but these shorter pieces that I have aren't going to work. So we'll have to keep these for arranging in foam. But this is going to give a nice bit of texture. It's going to fill out the middle part of the arrangement. And the greenery almost gives you like a base to support your flowers. I've got one more piece of the privet, which can add in more towards what I'm calling the back, although I'm intending on making this a design that you're going to see from all around. So we've essentially got a fairly good even round shape, and hopefully I'll be able to continue that shape as we go along. Now you'll know that I'm not a lover of gypsophila. I feel it gives it that quite messy look sometimes, but I've got these odd little stems and the colour link is going to work really well with the bottom. So on this occasion I'm going to use it and I'm going to go right the way around the outside initially to get this colour and texture in with the greenery, and then I'm going to place some towards the centre. Now if you are a new flower arranger, I often place people into two different categories. There are flower arrangers and florists who really love this loose look where there isn't a structured pattern and there's no sort of, I was going to say rules, but the rules are still here, but they're here in a different way. So this style doesn't have any pattern or structure. It's a lot softer in its format. And sometimes new arrangers find this difficult because they don't have that structure to follow. So sometimes when you're learning, it's easier to follow a set pattern and match flowers on either side. But in complete contrast, there are also new arrangers that come here to the studio who much prefer to do something softer and more gentle with a really country look to it than doing something that's quite formal. And on the channel, I try to do a mixture of the two so that we cater for everybody. So sometimes I add the gyp in right to the very end because I feel sometimes it gets damaged as it's such a fragile flower. But I've also got the limonium. So this is Status limonium. This is a flower that will dry quite naturally. Can have a bit of a fishy odour as it starts to dry. Its common name you might know as sea lavender, and we see it in drifts if you're in an area where there's any marshland or a tidal position. But it's a lovely soft textural material that's going to really suit this style of arranging. And I've only got one stem of it here. It's not really going to work in any designs. It's fantastic for hand ties, but one stem is not really much use for me here. Now, if we look at it, there's not really a balance in the colour. I've got this one section here of the pink flower and then I've got a little bit of gyp over there. But I'm not looking for structure and I'm not looking for pattern. My blue larkspur, which link with my container, I'm going to add in right at the very end. But what I'm going to do next is add in some heavier looking flowers. I quite often say on the channel, add weight to the bottom of the arrangement or choose the flower that's got the most visual weight. And when I say weight, I mean the size of the head. So if we look at this, visually, it's bigger and more dominating than my spray carnations. So I'm going to work first with my bigger flowers. And I'm not going to worry about getting too much of a perfect circular shape because I don't have matching flowers to go with it. Now this lovely orange rose, I'm not 100% sure of the variety of this one. I've had a lot of flowers in this week and I can't remember. But it's a big flower and I think it's easy to work with your bigger flowers first, spread them out so that the colour is as balanced around the arrangement as you possibly can. And then we can feed the smaller flowers in at the end. Remember to remove any petals or any leaves that are looking a bit sad. And anything that's woody stem needs to have a diagonal cut on the bottom, and you need to cut it a little longer than you would if you were putting it into foam because you don't have the extra height of the foam to work with. So you've almost got to get your flowers right the way down here to the bottom. So I have two flowers that I only have one of each. I have a single rose, that one is a white Naomi, and then I have a lovely chrysanthemum bloom. And what I really don't want to do is have this one almost like the cherry on the top of a cake, standing up like a soldier in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the two of them so that I don't have that center point. It's going to give me a more softer, more whimsical look. This one in the middle is going to be too straight and too severe, and it's going to give that old-fashioned traditional look if I put it in the middle. And I stopped then because I mentioned that it was White Naomi, and now I'm doubting myself. So if it's not White Naomi, I'll put it on the screen. I'll have to look back on my buy-in list. But a little tip, if you put your flower head upside down and this is the level that you want it to go into the arrangement, then that's roughly where you're going to cut it. So I'm going to cut it a little bit longer first of all, because we don't want it too short. I obviously can't add any stem on the end. And rather than putting it in that middle center point, which is really quite traditional and a little bit too formal for me, if we look in the overhead camera, we've got that really formal, quite traditional placement. What I'm going to do instead is angle it over slightly to one side, so we don't have that domed effect there in the middle. And then with the chrysanthemum bloom, and I've only got one of these left, I'm going to do the same type of effect. Remove any greenery from below the water level and then place it in so that again it's a little off center. It's not perfectly centered. So now we have two flowers towards the middle rather than that one in the center. And this is a good technique and a good skill for arranging mixed flowers, a mixed supermarket bunch where you don't have matching flowers. I only have one carnation, and this again is left over from something else, but I'm almost going to team this up with a more vibrant spray rose, and the colours aren't the same, but this cerise pink rose is picking up on the colour on the centre, so we're going to balance off the colour on either side of the arrangement. It's not going to be identical, but it's going to be really attractive, and I'm just going to slide that in. If you've not worked with wire netting before, then you've almost got to spin the stem of the flower so it works its way into the wire netting. And in the floral arrangement is this bigger section of pink here. So if I use this in the opposite side of the arrangement, I'm almost distributing that brighter, more vibrant pink into the opposite side. Now I know those of you that like symmetry and matching placements of flowers is really not going to like this, but it's a great style for using up oddments or bits and pieces that you might have left over. If you're a church flower arranger and you get gifted garden flowers, or if you're growing flowers in the garden yourself, this is a really good technique. I was just about to say I only have 2 gerbras left, but I've just found another of the carnations, and it's a slightly different colour again, so it doesn't match the other one, but I can use it in a different part of the arrangement. And what I'm aiming to do is not to have everything on the same level, like a flat dome. We want that up and down movement. We want to create some interest and not have that flat, very dated style of arranging. Now it's time for the last of my round flowers. So my gerbera is a soft stem flower, so if it's going into water, you need to cut it at an angle. If it's going into foam, you need to cut it straight. Trying to force a pointed soft stem flower into foam doesn't work. It just snaps the bottom of the flower. And I've used the round flowers first because these are visually the most heavy flowers, and then the line flowers are going to help create a little bit of movement up and down and out of the centre of the arrangement. And you can see if we look at it from the front that I've got different levels and different heights. I was going to put that in there, but I think so now I'm thinking that I don't have anywhere to fit in my second gerbera. And I ideally would like to sort of place it where that rose is. So I'm going to move the rose slightly over. We're just going to shimmy the orange one around. And one of the benefits of arranging in the wire netting is that if you've got nice clean stems on the bottom, it's really easy to be able to pull them out and move them around. You can't really do that with foam because you end up with a big hole in the foam, and that prevents you adding in any more flowers where the holes are. So let's get this more towards the middle in a position that looks quite attractive. Now I do appreciate that my flowers are quite open in this arrangement, and they're definitely not good enough to go out for a customer or to be sold back to anybody, but they're fantastic for showing you how to do floral designs. And then before I put my final flower in, which is going to be the spray carnation, I'm going to use the line flowers. And these are going to go into the arrangement slightly taller than the round flowers, because this is going to give the ability to draw your eye upwards. And I think if you bury this head down in amongst all the other flowers, there's no point in putting it in because you can't see it. So the line flowers are going to be taller. Don't worry if they're not conforming and not perfectly straight like we're used to seeing with all supermarket and florist flowers. Place it in so that the curve is accentuated and it gives it that really lovely look. This one is a great one for beginners because we're not really worrying about patterns and structure and formal shapes. We're just placing the flowers in so that we can enjoy them and have a bit of a restful afternoon. Right, before my spray carnations, I think I'm going to add in the amazing larkspur, and I'm really going to extend the height up with these. Again, why do we use a line flower like this and then bury it in the middle of the design? Really extend the height. I've got 3, so I'm gonna fairly evenly distribute the colour all the way around. It's quite a dominant colour, and it creates a really lovely link between the blue of my container. So with all those oddments of flowers, I've now got quite an interesting shape, and we can finish off with the spray carnations. Not everybody's favourite because they're deemed to be a bit old-fashioned, but it's such a long-lasting flower. They're very economical to buy in a supermarket, and if you're a beginner, they're fantastic to use because they're really strong and robust and they don't damage very well. You probably won't get these in a florist shop because they're deemed to be a little old-fashioned and from the 1980s, but they're such good value for money. And you might have growing in the garden some spray carnations, you might have some sweet william, which are the same family. We don't necessarily have to use them on the full stem, we can also use the individual heads. And it's just a case now of me dotting around the different coloured flowers so that I fill in any gaps and I reinforce that outline shape that I've created. Spray carnations is not a flower I use very often in the studio, but this week I've been creating some designs from the 1980s, and I've got lots of pastel flowers left here which are really reminiscent of the 1980s. So I think that would be fantastic on a sideboard or a little coffee table at home. And if you're using fresh flowers, then it would be a fantastic gift for somebody. Using wire netting is fantastic for garden flowers because they really appreciate the water at the bottom and not being blocked up by the floral foam. And for flowers that were hanging around with no purpose at all really, I think I've created a fantastic design. So don't forget, I'll be back every Sunday for a new video. If you want to subscribe and hit the notification bell, you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. So thanks for watching and goodbye for now.